Hi there F-450 owners. Today in your 2019 Ford F-450 Super Duty, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Airlift's WirelessONE Compressor System. This is what our compressor looks like when it's installed. It's one of the cleanest, most compact packages out there for an onboard compressor system for your airbags. Everything is located inside of this bracket assembly. That includes your module, the relay valve that directs the air out to the airbags, the compressor, the wireless receiver. It's all here. And this makes it so much easier to get it installed than any of the other ones out there. Because the other ones you're going to have to mount this component, you mount your relay, you got to mount your compressor, and all that stuff. Not with this guy. This guy's, boom, one package. It's also one of the easiest to wire with only 3 wires that you need to hook up. And in my experience with it, it's the most responsive. When you hit the button on your remote to tell this thing to inflate, there's really not much of a delay. 1 or 2 seconds and it's on the go. Some of the other systems out there, you'll hit the button to send it to tell it to wake up and start airing it up, and you might wait a full minute before it decides to go ahead and do it. It has a maximum output pressure of 120 psi, and for most people this is going to be plenty. Now there are some airbags out there that go up to 150 psi in pressure, but under most conditions, when you've got your truck loaded down, you rarely ever want more than about 50 pounds in the airbags. That's usually enough to level your vehicle back out, because once you get above 50 pounds, it gets really stiff and the ride can be real rough. So for most cases, this is going to be plenty. Speaking of airbags, we have airbags available here at etrailer.com with custom fit brackets for your F-450, so you don't have to do any drilling to get those mounted up. To begin your installation, you'll want to mount your compressor. I went ahead and mounted mine underneath next to our fuel tank here, and we just mounted it using self-tapping screws. Now self-tapping screws don't come with your kit, but you can purchase those here at etrailer.com. You really only need to have 1 on each side, but I went ahead and put 2 on each side just to have that extra strength. Your compressor system can mount just about anywhere. You can mount it on your frame rail, underneath, in your engine compartment. The hardest part in the installation almost is trying to figure out the best place to put the compressor where it's not going to be in the way of any components, and it's going to be easy to access so you can make all the connections you need to. We've decided to mount ours next to the fuel tank underneath the vehicle. We can now start making our wiring connections. I would start with the black wire. The black wire is going to be on your compressor, and it's just got a ring terminal on it. And when you're mounting your compressor up, I would recommend putting it underneath one of those screws that you're using to hold it down, and this will give it a good ground. Then there's a red wire coming off of your compressor as well. It has a Spade terminal on it, but the Spade terminal is not going to be used. You actually just cut it off, and then we're going to butt connector it to the other harness that comes in our kit. Here's our other harness. It has a large connector on it with 4 wires coming out of it. The red wire with the white stripe is what we're going to connect the red wire to coming off of our compressor. We use the included heat shrink butt connector to make that connection. Just crimp them together and then use a heat gun to shrink it down. We can now take our connector here and we're going to plug it into our air compressor. Make sure that the lock tab here is pushed out. It should come in the out position. Plug into the side and then push your lock tab down to lock it in place. And then you can route your wiring up towards your engine compartment because we need to hook it to our battery. I routed mine across here following our factory wiring, and then we went up over the frame and followed this factory harness here up to the front, just staying down the side of the frame. We secured it along the way using the included zip ties and just followed this all the way forward until we get to the front body mount here. Once we reach this front body mount, we're going to actually just go right past the body mount and then go up the firewall into our engine compartment. The paneling right here for your wheel well is flexible enough for you to kind of push it back to make it easy for you to get your hand up in there to feed that wiring up into your engine compartment. Our wires come up here just underneath our powertrain control module on the passenger side, and we're just going to stretch them up. Now this is where you've got a couple of options. Our 3 wires here, our red wire hooks to our battery positive, the black wire is our ground, and the pink wire here is an optional wire that doesn't have to be connected. It will hook to a ignition source, so it's only powered when the key is turned on, and all this does is that it excites the system to make it check the air pressures, and if they aren't where they were last set, the compressor will automatically come on and readjust those pressures so that way it's ready to go as soon as you turn the key on. Now, It's optional because there's also an inertia sensor inside the compressor, so once you start moving and the compressor detects movement with that inertia sensor, it'll start adjusting right then. So this is just so you can get a head start and making sure that you're adjusted before you leave. We're going to start by hooking up our ground wire. And you can either hook this directly to the battery stud here, although I don't necessarily recommend it with this style of connection that it has on our battery negative, because this is the clamp where it pulls it tight. You really don't want to put things on it. But if you look just here along the side of the frame here, we've got a ground point right there. So we're just going to hook it right behind the battery. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of route it how we want it. Trim off the excess. I always like to leave just a little bit. I don't like the wire to be tight. It's good for the future in case you ever have to change anything, reroute it, or make repairs. We're going to strip it back after we've cut it to length and crimp on the included ring terminal onto the black wire. We'll then use an 8mm socket or wrench to remove the ground bolt. We'll then slide our ring terminal on it and then just reinstall it. And now for our power wire. Now this is where you've got a couple of different options. Your kit will come with a fuse harness, and you can cut this harness in half here. You'll connect one side to your battery positive, and the other side you can connect to the red wire here to get a constant power. But what our customer requested was a way to disable the compressor, and this is a good idea in case of the event that there is ever anything that happens. Let's say you run over something on the road and it damages one of the air lines. Well, once this happens, your compressor is going to kick on and it's going to try to refill the airbags in your system, but it's not going to be able to because you have an air leak. So we're wiring it to one of the factory switches inside the vehicle, so that way in this event he would be able to hit the switch to turn the compressor off so it doesn't run continuously. You'll find your factory switch harnesses located over here on the driver's side, just behind the relay box here. And all of these are going to be labeled. We're using the brown wire with the green stripe, which is labeled for relay output 1. And that's going to correspond with auxiliary switch 1 in your overhead console. So we extended this wire and ran it across to the passenger side where we're going to connect it to our red wire. We ran our wire that we extended across the top here, just zip tying it to this plastic piece. And we're now going to connect it to both the red and the pink wire, because since this is only going to operate when the switch is turned on, this way when he turns the switch on, it's not only going to power up the compressor, but it's going to get power on our trigger wire here, which is also going to excite it, wake it up, and then have it check to fill the system. So we're going to go ahead and cut these to length now. We'll then trim off a little bit of the excess we had here on the wire that we ran over. Strip all of them back. We'll then crimp a butt connector onto here to our black wire. And then on the other side, we're going to connect both the red and the pink. So we're going to twist them together first and then crimp them down. We can then use our heat gun to shrink down our butt connector, keep out any moisture. This will help ensure a long-lasting connection. We can then use the included zip ties just to clean up our wiring here to make it nice and neat. Inside, these are the switches that we were talking about. We've hooked ours to Auxiliary 1. These switches are already pre-wired from the factory. They just have that bundle of wires out there with the outputs from the switch. So you just need to choose the one. Again, we were using the brown wire with the green stripe because that corresponds with Auxiliary 1. There are labels on both the bundle of wires under the hood there, where they're located behind the fuse box that we pointed out, as well as more information in your owner's manual. We're now back underneath and we need to run our air lines from our compressor back to our airbags. When hooking up your air line, you are going to have to cut it at a few points to make the connections. And it's important that you use the appropriate tool. If you just use a pair of side cutters on here, it's going to pinch it and it's not going to cut it with a nice clean cut like you see there. We have hose cutters available here at etrailer.com that you can purchase. And a hose cutter is going to use a sharp razor blade with a flat surface on one side to ensure that you get a nice clean cut just like that. We'll then take our air line and it just pokes here in the bottom of the air compressor, because everything on this system is connected with quick connect fittings, so the air line simply just boom, I like to push it in and pull it out a couple times to make sure that it's fully seated. From here, I'm going to route it towards the back to where our airbags are located. Once we get back to the airbags, we're going to cut it, and we're going to insert a T onto that line. From there, we're going to insert another T onto one of the other ends coming out of our T. And this T is going to go branch to each the left and right side airbags. The red line you see here is an existing line from our original airbag installation, and this goes to the manual inflation valve located at the back of the vehicle. I like that Airlift included this because typically on some compressor systems you only get one T-fitting, which allows you to hook the air compressor, branch it to each airbag, but then you have no way to air it up except for with the compressor. Airlift thought about that and included an additional valve so you can keep one of your manual inflation valves for emergency situations. And your airbags will have quick connect fittings on them as well, so they simply just poke into those at each airbag. When routing your airlines, you want to make sure you avoid any moving components, such as your steering or suspension components, and anything excessively hot, such as your exhaust. Like we did with our wiring, I recommend that you follow factory wiring when routing it, because factory wiring is already in a location where it is safe from any of those dangerous components. We've gone ahead and turned the vehicle on, and then turned our auxiliary switch on to power up our compressor. We can then pair our remote. This is the first thing you're going to need to do, and it's pretty simple. You just take your remote out. As soon as you power up the compressor, just hit the button and just keep pressing it basically, and it'll go through the menus automatically and pair itself. If you need more information, you can refer to your instructions. If it didn't pair successfully the first time, you can power the system down completely and then start over. We've got ours all paired up, and we've got 5 pounds in the system. You have 4 buttons on your remote. You have up and down to increase the air pressure, and then you have 2 memory buttons. This gives you a total of 3 different memory positions. You've got memory 1, memory 2, and then if you press them both at the same time, that gives you memory 3. Memory 1 is set from the factory to 5 pounds, and I recommend you keep it there because 5 pounds is the minimum pressure you want to have in your system. So this is your unloaded pressure basically. 2 from the factory is set to 20 pounds, and this you could change to anything you want. I'd recommend setting this one to a typical load that you constantly pull. For example, let's say you have a pop-up camper that you hook up to the back of your truck. So you could set this for that. And you can see here that the up arrow is on, indicating the compressor was on, airing it up. It just went off. We've gone from 5 to 20 pounds in just that short amount of time. Pressing both the buttons together will give us preset 3, which is 40 pounds from the factory, and you can adjust this for whatever you want as well. To save a memory setting, you simply adjust the pressure to whatever you want it to be, and then you just hold down that preset button until it saves it. And if you lose your remote or you just don't have it on you at the time, you can adjust all of this from your phone using the WirelessONE app. You can download this on your Android or iOS devices and do all the same things that your remote can do straight from the app. And that completes our installation of Airlift's WirelessONE Compressor System on your 2019 Ford F-450.